All right, welcome back. This is the Something Ventured podcast. I'm Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. My guest today is Rob Chesnut. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Kent. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for doing this. Well, Rob has been the chief ethics officer at Airbnb, and who knew they had such a thing. Was the general counsel at Chegg. Before that was the senior VP of trust and safety at eBay, and has written a book, and if you can think of a more relevant topic right now, I challenge you, called Intentional Integrity, How Smart Companies Can Lead an Ethical Revolution. But it all began, you were out of law school, you're a prosecutor back east, is that right?
I was a federal prosecutor in just outside of Washington, D.C. I used to prosecute spies, as well as bank robbers and drug dealers and the like. So I've been dealing with integrity issues my whole career.
That's right. And how do you make it, well, yeah, let's talk about a low integrity group of people you're dealing with there early on. How does someone find a path from that, which actually sounds exciting. I know things are always different in reality. Carve a path from that to kind of obviously a bunch of top public, soon to be public Silicon Valley companies.
Well, being a federal prosecutor, it's an interesting job, and you meet a lot of people you wouldn't ordinarily run into in life. But after a while, it's a real negative. It has a negative aspect to it, Kent. You're putting young people in jail for long periods of time, and you kind of feel like you're not contributing in a positive, proactive way to society. You're kind of there at the very end of where someone's about to go to jail for a long period of time. So I wanted to do something positive in the world, and I always liked business. So I sat down and I thought, how can I get involved in business? Because as a federal prosecutor, companies would look at my resume and they'd say, well, you're a really good federal prosecutor, but we don't need a federal prosecutor.
Right.
And, Ken, I got really lucky. There was a small company in my jurisdiction in Northern Virginia, and I kept getting phone calls about it from other prosecutors.
Yeah.
They wanted to prosecute this company. They wanted records from this company. I'm like, who is this company? And what are they doing that's causing all this attention? And the name of this little company was AOL, America Online. So I'm like, well, I don't really know much about this internet, but maybe I should learn. So I went out and got one of their discs. He stuffed it in my computer, plugged the phone into the back of my computer, and I started exploring the internet. And I'm like, wow, this internet thing looks like it could really it could last. And I started using different internet sites, and one of the sites I used was eBay. Yep. And one night it hit me. eBay's got issues with fraud, illegal items, all sorts of regulatory issues. I'll bet they could use somebody like me. So I sent my resume to jobs@ebay.com. They didn't even have a job opening.
Wow,
right?
well connected.
To be honest with you, I knew they were in California.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure exactly where San Jose was because I had never been to San Jose. But I figured the weather's better there, no matter what. So I sent my resume off thinking, I'll never hear anything. And came home the next day, and there was a voice message on my voicemail. And a week later, I'm having dinner with this woman by the name of Meg Whitman.
Wow.
The company, when they hired me, they only had 170 people.
Wow.
So I happened to be really at the right place at the right time, and that sort of set off the next phase of my career.
That was kind of I found that to be kind of a magical time. Like the first time I used something like AOL, or I guess Mosaic was the old one, where you first sort of see the internet. Now we take it for granted, and you're on an airplane and you're mad that your Netflix isn't coming in fast. But back then I remember this feeling of like, wow, I'm on a server in, Minnesota, and I live in San Diego. There's something just more super magical about that time.
The world was a very different time, Kent. When I was a prosecutor, I would be on duty a lot of weekends. Right. And being on duty back then as a federal prosecutor meant you had to carry this briefcase with you. And in this briefcase was this satellite phone. And the thing was a monster. It was like carrying, around a couple of volumes of the old encyclopedias. It was heavy. And, there were no cell phones. You wanted to make a phone call, you had to go to a payphone. So the idea, when I went onto the internet and saw everything that was there, and I didn't begin to grasp the full potential, but I could tell this was going to change the world. And it was really a magical time.
So you end up running trust and safety there. What was is there a big, is this where your sort of interest, I mean, obviously your interest in ethics started with the prosecuting people who didn't have a lot of those. Is this where your interest starts to develop in this topic, or?
Well, I think it starts with your parents. It started as a young
Sure.
age. I still remember, I tell the story in my book of a very distinct childhood memory was my mom and I leaving a grocery store, and we stop in the parking lot. My mom's looking at the money in her hand, and she looks at me and says, "We've got to go back inside."
Yeah.
So we turn around, we go back inside. And I remember the conversation she was having with the cashier, and the cashier was very surprised and very grateful. It turns out the woman had given my mom too much change.
Oh,
And my
boy.
mom was going back in to give her the money that she wasn't supposed to have.
Right.
And my mom talked to me about it afterwards. And it made a big impression on me. And I've marched my kids back into a couple of stores,
Yeah.
back, on those instances where you pay cash and
Right.
there's a mistake, but it makes a big impression. And I was always taught to if something doesn't belong to you, then don't take it,
Yeah.
return it. And it made an impression on me early on.
That is funny. I think I had one or two of those as a kid where I probably stole candy from a store.
Yep.
And, my parents realizing what had happened, instead of like, whatever, the most, you march you back to the store, have you talk to the manager, make it up by, or whatever it was. And it's a little incident over a 30-cent piece of candy, but it sticks with you. It really does.
Yeah. And I think it made an impression on my choice of the directions to go in life and what I wanted to do. I think it probably had an impact on my decision to be a prosecutor, and I think it's something that stuck with me through my career. Everywhere I've gone, I think I've been very involved in rules and order, and at least trying to do the right thing. And look, the right thing's not always clear, and people can reasonably disagree about it. But what I think is important is that you try. That you acknowledge that trying to get it right is important, and you do the best you can.
Right. So you go from there to Chegg. Now, Chegg, it was pre-public, and you helped take them public. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they were. In fact, when we got there, the Dan Rosenzweig, the CEO, is still the CEO of the company.
Yeah.
We were doing textbook rentals, physical textbooks.
Yeah.
And we had a big warehouse with a couple of million books out in Kentucky. And we realized that wasn't going to make it in the long run, because it was only a matter of time before Amazon started renting books, because it was a very popular model. But what we worked on was evolving the company to a digital education platform.
Yep.
And I think that's what made Chegg a successful company. I think it's an $8 billion public company today, and growing at a rapid pace. Because look, our education system needs to evolve and change. In the old days, Kent, you went to college for 4 years.
Right.
And you learn, and then you went off, you got a job, you stayed at a company for 30 years, and you retired and got a gold watch.
Right.
Today, the world is moving so quickly. There's no way you can learn something in college and have that knowledge base take care of you. We all need to be lifelong learners.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's part of what Chegg is about, and what I think is so important. We've got to change the way we learn.
What do you make of the college experience? I've thought about this lately, as colleges say they're going to, be all Zoom all the time or whatever it is. What do you make of the college experience that we probably had? You go and you read Kierkegaard and you get drunk and you argue all night, and you think that's really formative. Or are we just kidding ourselves that it was important? Or
I think we're kidding ourselves if we believe that college is preparing people practically for life and for careers. I don't think it does that. What I do think it does is I think it helps you grow up. It's a transitory phase between the cocoon of home and the cold, harsh reality of life. And it's a transition phase where you learn what it's like to live by yourself a bit. And I also think you become a little bit of a rounded human being, where you're learning a lot of interesting things. Now, there's a big cost to that, though.
That's right.
In the old days, you would get this college degree, and it was your ticket. That was what my parents taught me. It's like, you're going to college because your college. They didn't go to college, but they saw that college was the ticket to success. If only we get you into college, you can graduate. It's all going to be great. That's changed. Because I think today, so many people go to college. They don't get the skills they need for a job. They get out with a huge, massive debt that it doesn't make sense financially for everybody. So again, that's just another way in which I think the world of education is changing.
Yeah. I do worry sometimes about the hyper practicalism of when you kind of get rid of the, the arts and the philosophy, and everyone's, famously in World War II, somebody came to Churchill and said, "Hey, we can get rid of all these arts programs to save some money for the war." And he's like, "What the hell do you think we're fighting for?"
So, love Churchill. That's great. No, I think there's a lot of value in it. I just think we have to recognize what its limits are.
Yeah.
And also recognize that maybe it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
Maybe for some people, they'd be better off learning a trade.
Yeah. Well, and so now you come to Airbnb, which is really just one of the seminal companies. I mean, one of the monsters that's been developed in Silicon Valley, a company that touches lots of people all over the world. You should start by asking what happened as and I hope I don't ask this as a stupid question. When COVID hit, I'm curious what happened to Airbnb. And I say, hopefully not a stupid question, because I just tried to book an Airbnb in California, and it was sold. I mean, this place was sold out all summer, for 6 months. Now, it was a place with a pool in the middle of nowhere. But I'm curious kind of how that wave rolled over that company in particular.
Well, obviously, it was a seismic event for the company. It went from, the company was highly successful, quite a roll, booking, in some cases, it wouldn't be unusual to have 1 million bookings in a night. And then, boom, suddenly out of the blue, everything just stopped.
Right.
And it was a real test, I think, for the company, and a real test for the company's leadership. Now, what we're seeing is first of all, humans love to travel.
Yes.
So I don't think that the pandemic is going to push people to stay in their homes forever. Right. I think that people are going to travel. But what I think we're going to see is that there's maybe a different type of travel. One thing there's a trend I think that may come out of the pandemic, Kent, which is really going to help Airbnb, and that is work anywhere. So if you can work and do your job from literally anywhere that has internet access, that suddenly frees you to go places and do things 52 weeks a year that you might otherwise have only been able to do 3 weeks a year.
Right.
So if I can go to a wonderful location and work while I'm there, that's pretty attractive. Yeah. And I think that what Airbnb is now seeing is a move away from business travel and toward longer bookings in great places.
Interesting.
So if I can do my job from a beach in Hawaii, why wouldn't I do that for a couple weeks?
Right.
And then maybe I want to go to a mountain to see the mountains and relax out in nature for a while. Why don't I go book an Airbnb for a couple of weeks there? It makes you wonder whether, what's the role going to be of the traditional lease?
Yeah.
I know some retired couples that live on Airbnb. They literally don't have a home. All of their possessions are in a big rolling duffel. Yeah. And they will go spend 2 weeks, a month in a location, learn a city, have a great time, and then go to the next place. And it will be interesting to see how people come out of the pandemic. But what I think we may see is a move away from traditional leases in high density areas where people were living because they had jobs tying them to that area, and people traveling even more, but working while they travel.
I mean, do you think that's the same for, I don't have a point of view on this, but I'm fascinated by it. A 25-year-old who's super ambitious, wants to meet her husband or, whatever partner, do they want to be doing that, or do they want to be, in the cafeteria at Google and, in the mix of things, or at Goldman Sachs in New York?
Well, you raise a great point. I think we are human and we love human interaction.
Yeah.
I don't think the world is going to suddenly go completely the other way to all remote work, because there's something magic about being actually in a room with someone else and having human interaction. And that, whether that's for, you want to meet, you want to have friends, you want to have dating relationships, or just to get the work done.
Right.
I don't think that we're going to suddenly abandon that sense of human connection. And in fact, I do think that after the pandemic, there will still be company headquarters, there will still be meetings and the like. But I do think you're going to see a trend where people can work remotely, and while they're working remotely, that may be where they have more human interaction. We may get away from friendships, partnerships, relationships that are tied to the workplace, and more tied to where you are in the moment.
Right. So at Airbnb, the typical thing a company would do is have an ethics manual. It's probably, if you're general counsel, that was probably under you.
Yes.
You could download a PDF from the internet probably and email it to your employees, or you could, your law firm could probably write one up for you and you could send it around and check the box. But something took you a little further on this journey of having an ethical company and an ethical culture.
Well, Kent, I think the world is changing. And I saw this really about 4 years ago when Uber started having issues. Susan Fowler's blog post.
Yep.
It struck me that the world was starting to hold leaders, celebrities, companies to a higher standard. I mean, things that were people never talked about but knew were going on with certain celebrities, for example, or bad behavior by certain CEOs. I think the internet empowered people to speak up for the first time and call out this bad behavior. And I think part of this is driven by the fact that employees want to work at a place they're proud of. Yep. And in the old days, again, you're staying at a company for 30 years, you're not going to dare rock the boat. Right. Because it could wreck your career. Well, I think employees have got a lot more power and more mobility now. They've also got a global platform for what they see, and that is the internet. Blog posts, Slack, Glassdoor, Blind, it's everywhere. So if they are working at a company and the company's values do not align with their own values, they're speaking up and they're walking out. And I saw this about 3 or 4 years ago and thought, you know what, the old way of looking at ethics and integrity, that doesn't strike me as sufficient. And you talked about the old way. The old way is, the code of ethics that somebody emails out and checks a box over. There's a pretty integrity poster on the wall that's got a lake and tree, right. But nobody ever talks about what the word integrity means.
The print's too fine. I can't read those.
Yeah. Well, you got the compliance posters.
Yeah, right.
That doesn't do it. And that old way was there was no human discussion about what it meant. And so, I sat down with Brian Chesky, the founder, CEO at Airbnb. And I talked to him about this. I said, look, Brian, one thing that can derail us would be our integrity issues. Like they can derail any company. And it was Techlash, but it was bigger than Techlash. Yeah. So look, the bigger you are, the more successful you are, the more the eyes of the world with spotlights are coming for you. Yeah. Let's make sure we are as ready as we can be. And he said, how do you do that? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet, Brian. And he looked at me and said, go big, which is very Brian, go big. Yeah. So we embarked on creating a different kind of an ethics program. One where we openly talked about the importance of integrity at our company. And I actually did some work on some of the science behind it. I went and met with a guy by the name of Dan Ariely, who is a behavioral psychologist at Duke University. And he's done TED Talks. He's got a movie called Dishonesty. He studies this stuff. And what I learned is that integrity is contagious, but so is a lack of integrity. Right. So if people look around and they see leaders behaving badly and making questionable ethical decisions, it frees them up to feel like they can do it too. Right. If, however, they look around and they feel that the environment around them is one where integrity matters and where people talk about integrity and people appear to be acting with integrity, Well, everybody wants to feel good about themselves, Kent.
Right.
And the way that they judge how they feel about themselves often is in comparison to others. So if like everybody else is acting that way, then you're a lot more likely to act that way.
Right.
So I came away from meeting with Dan thinking, we've got to create an environment like that at Airbnb where we actually talk about integrity, where we come out and say, this is the way that we want to operate. This is what we're about. This is the way our leaders operate. And look, it has to start at the top. If your CEO and your leadership team don't act with integrity, then you're sunk. There's nothing you can do because the rest of the company is going to take their lead there. But if the leadership of a company is willing to say, you know what, we want to be proud of our company and the way that we act. Integrity is important to us. Then you can have an open human conversation. You can weave it into the fabric of the culture of a company. And then when you've done that, it will actually impact how people operate every day and improve behavior and raise the level, raise the bar, which is what I think we were able to do.
How does Brian have that conversation with the board? If Travis has a conversation with the board, he says, well, the company's worth $80 billion, so who cares?
Right.
Or whatever form that takes. How does Brian say, hey, I'm actually allocating resources. My, general counsel's spending a big chunk of time on this. This is important.
Well, the good news is it doesn't cost much money. Integrity takes mind share. It takes time. I'll give you an example. We have orientation at Airbnb.
Yeah.
It's a week long. Everybody who's new to the company comes in. It's about 20 to 25 classes your first week at the company. And when I started the program, I said, well, we're going to have an integrity class. And they're like, you're going to do an ethics class, Rob? We're going to have a lawyer talking to people for an hour about integrity? We're not trying to drive these people out. Yeah. And I said, no. I said, we can have fun with this.
The joke writes itself, right?
Yeah. And I said, but, we can have fun with this. And they said, well, we do blind surveys at the end of the week. We rate all the programs. And I said, you know what? If it's received poorly, then I think we would be doing damage if we continue to do it. Let's see how it goes. Yeah. Guess what the number one ranked orientation class is at Airbnb? It's the integrity program. Because people really appreciate. I had a woman come up to me earlier this year in tears, literally tears coming down her cheek at the end of the hour. She said, Rob, I had to tell you that I left my last job at major tech company in the Valley. Yeah. She said, because my manager kept propositioning me. And I didn't trust my company to do anything about it. I had to leave. She said, you have no idea what it means to me to come to a place where a leader is standing up live and talking about how this is important to the culture of the company. She said, it makes me feel as though if I ever had an issue like that at Airbnb, I could come forward. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's it. That's what you want. You want to create that feeling that, you know what, it's important to leadership. It matters at this company. And employees really appreciated it. They gravitated toward the program in so many different ways. I think there's a pride in it at Airbnb. And that's what you want.
And I assume from a business perspective, not that this is the reason, but the word goes out. I mean, she tells her friends, hey, here's the experience I'm having at my company. And if you're not having that, we're looking for a few more good people.
Well, that matters to people today. It's people want more than a paycheck, Ken. A paycheck's important, but they want to feel like their life's work really matters. They want to feel like they're working at a place that has values and a mission that align with their own personal values and mission. And so all the studies will show that they're much more likely to stay at a company where they feel that alignment. They're more likely to tell others about it. Right. And hopefully you create a virtuous cycle where it becomes, I actually think that integrity is a superpower, because not only does it attract employees who are like-minded, but what about customers? Right. All the data shows that customers today are more values-driven in their buying decisions than ever. I think 64%, according to a Forbes survey. So that means that customers want to do business with companies where they feel that company's values are aligned with their own. And if they feel there's a mismatch, they're going to move their money. They're going to go somewhere else. So interesting. People say, well, integrity's nice, Rob, but we've got business to do here, and it's a dog eat dog world.
Yeah.
The data actually shows that companies that independently score higher on integrity metrics actually outperform the market and outperform their competitors. So in reality, I don't think you can afford not to make integrity part of your business.
Right. So how do you come to put this into a book? Like, what's that seems hard to me, by the way, writing a book.
It was. I never thought I would write a book, but my wife was a book agent early in her career. She's now in venture capital, but to hammer, everything looks like a nail. To a former book agent, everything looks like a book. So I'm coming home at night, and I'm talking to her about what we're doing, and she's like, "You got to write a book." I'm like, "Oh, I'm not going to write a book." She said, "No." She said, "This is really important. So many companies could learn from this, and you could have such a broad impact." I'm like, yeah. I got a day job. I'm the general counsel here at the company. And she said, "I'll get you a writer, and I'll get you a major publishing deal if you'll do this." And I looked at her and said, "Yeah, okay. You get me a writer. You get me a big publishing deal. I'll do it." Well, I should have said that, knowing my wife, because a month later, she had a writer. She had a major publishing deal with Macmillan. And so what I did was I said, I went to the writer, and I said, "All right, I'll give you every Monday night, 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. I'm going to block my calendar, and we'll sit down and we'll work together on Monday nights." She wrote during the week and then sent it to me on the weekend. I'd read it on the weekend, and then we'd go back again at it Monday nights. And we did this for a year and a half.
Wow.
And by the time it was done, I decided that the book and the things in the book meant more to me than being a general counsel at a major company. And I thought, you know what? I've practiced law 35 years. I'd like to focus on this for a while. This seems really important to me. So that's when I went to Brian. We talked about it. And I said, why don't I take on this chief ethics officer role for a while? And why don't we get somebody else in to be general counsel? Because I think for the long run, this other thing speaks to me more.
That's incredible. Writing the book, did that help you think about? A lot of people write a book and they say that clarified their thinking on things, the process of doing that. Did that help open things up, or was it you just telling the tale that you'd learned in your background?
I think it started as me just telling the tale, but as it went on, I think it clarified thinking. Well, one thing I did, I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book, I better go actually talk to some people who know more than I do about this, which I didn't think was that hard. So I actually went out and talked to people. I spent some time with Adam Silver, commissioner at the NBA, who I think is a very high integrity leader. I went to talk to Eric Holder, the former attorney general. Carlos Santana, believe it or not, Carlos Santana lives in the Bay Area, and he has actually spoken quite a bit about integrity in his personal life and how important it is. So I went out and talked to a lot of different people about this, Reid Hoffman, Ben Horowitz, and it was a learning journey for me. And and of course, look, the book's been done now for several months. I already want to rewrite it, because every week you read another article, you do more thinking about it, and your thought processes advance. So I think the whole thing is just a learning journey, and I've got to get the book out and get it behind me so I can start thinking about the next thing.
And what is the intentional part? It's the first word of the thing. Obviously, I know what it means, but what does that guide? Is it the intention of the CEO? Is that we all need to be intentional? What does that word mean?
It's a little bit of all of it. I think that the point of that word is that integrity is a word that people are often uncomfortable talking about, because it's moral, right? It gets to people's morals, their personal, maybe even their religion, and so leaders are uncomfortable talking about it. And what leaders often do when they're uncomfortable about something, they outsource it to HR and legal, and it becomes compliance.
Right.
There's a difference, though, between compliance and integrity. So the point of the title is we have to get over the discomfort. We have to have the conversation. And if we want integrity to be part of our company, we can't just assume that it's going to happen, that we're just going to hire good people and that it's going to happen. We have to make an intentional effort to weave it into our culture.
Yeah.
And so that the point of that title, I think, is a call for getting through that discomfort and taking affirmative steps to make it a part of what you do in business.
Right. Can anyone else at the company do it other than the CEO? I mean, can the board push it to a CEO? Can the employees convert a CEO? Or is it, the leader, Brian's the guy and that's why it happened?
I think that there are some leaders who it simply can't happen because they that's not the way that they operate. That's not the way that they think about the world. I think that there are some leaders who it's more natural for. They believe it. It's the way they were raised. It's the way they operate in business. And there, I think it's easy. I do think there's a group in the middle that generally likes the idea of doing the right thing, but they just haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
And I think a good board or even an employee base where the CEO is willing to listen can influence the CEO and move them in that direction.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible. But where it's not possible is where there's not a commitment at the leadership level. Because you could talk about integrity all you want, and then the first time there's a quarterly number or something comes up, you've got to do the right thing.
Yeah.
It's on, and then you don't follow it, and then everybody then you look like a hypocrite for even talking about it.
I just have like one or two more things, but I'm curious, like as running something like Airbnb, which is a group of employees with all the issues that come with that, and a platform, were the issues you were dealing with largely the employee issues, the Me Too or whatever, or was it the, sort of, are we a platform or do we have a responsibility to our, to our customers in different ways? Like where did those issues?
Well, you can't have integrity inside the company and ignore it out, on the platform, or vice versa. So with Brian, again, this is great because this is the way that Brian naturally thinks about things. And I'll give you an example, and that was discrimination. Back in 2016, I had been the general counsel for about 1 month, and the word started coming out on the internet that guests were being discriminated against in bookings on Airbnb. They couldn't get a room because the color of their skin was causing hosts to turn them down.
Wow. So
I'm the word grows and grows. A couple of lawsuits are filed. Being the new dutiful general counsel, I go off and do my legal research on what is the Airbnb's legal responsibility for discrimination that might be against our rules, but it's done by host, not done by Airbnb. Is Airbnb legally responsible? Does the Fair Housing Act even apply to Airbnb, right? So I go off and do my research. I go in to meet with Brian, my first big meeting on a big legal issue with Brian. And I start to go into to my findings. And Brian holds up his hand and says, "Stop. I don't care." I said, "What? You don't care? What do you mean you don't care?" He said, "If people are being discriminated against based on the color of their skin on our platform, we are failing as a company.
Yeah.
Our mission is to connect human beings together in a very human way through travel." He said, "How could we have that as our mission, yet allow discrimination like this to go on?" See, he said, "I don't really care whether it's legal or not." He said, we're going to go after it, and we're not going to rest until we've fixed this problem." I'm like, wow, this is great. As a general counsel, this is wonderful because now you're freed up to do things very differently. The first thing I did was I picked up the phone and called the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. They regulate housing in California, and they had sued us on this issue. I called and said, "I want to come down to," they were in LA. "I want to come down to LA and talk to you." They said, "We don't want to talk to you." I said, "No." I said, "Really?" I said, I want to come down. I said, "Please, let's have a meeting." And they said, "We don't want to meet with you." And I finally said, "Give me 15 minutes. You don't have to say a word. In 15 minutes, you can throw me out of the room, but I've got something I need to tell you." So they finally agreed. I went down and I looked at them and I said, "Look, this is our view of things." I said, "We could get into a big fight with you about the law." I said, "But that would be a waste of everybody's time because bottom line, we agree with you. We are as concerned about this as you are. And I'd much rather spend the time partnering with you. Anything that you would try to order us to do to overcome this discrimination, we're probably not only willing to do it, but we're probably willing to go further because of our mission. Let's partner." And that's ultimately what we were able to do. Lawsuit went away. And as a result, we were able to partner with the DFEH and with civil rights organizations and implement a number of changes to the website that I think have made a big difference. So I think it actually, when you operate with integrity and try to do the right thing, not just the legal thing, it actually makes doing the legal thing a lot easier.
Yeah. And where does that get? I mean, obviously, it's wrong in all of its forms to not allow a person of color, but are there jurisdictions, places in the world where you kind of went, oh, that's weird. They have a cultural thing that's different than what we think, and we think they're wrong, but it's our platform.
That's right. And that's what we did. One of the things that we did to deal with discrimination was we had a very simple statement that if you are going to be part of the Airbnb community, you are going to treat everyone with respect and with belonging, regardless of the color of their skin, their race, their religion, their gender, and the like. Right now, that's not the law in a lot of places, right?
That's right.
But we said, we don't care. That's what we're about. And if you can't agree to that fundamental statement of what we're about as a company, then you're going to have to go somewhere else.
Right. This isn't your product.
And we lost. Yeah, we lost. Well, this wasn't buried in our terms of service, but we put this right up front with you when you joined. And we lost about 1% of our users who wouldn't even agree to that statement. And Brian said, I don't care.
Yeah.
That's what we stand for. And I think in the long run, we will be better off as a company for having taken that stand.
It seems crazy that even 1% of people couldn't agree to that concept. I mean, it's Well, remember that in a lot of places in the world, that is something that is controversial. And also, you got to remember, there are some people, because I talked to some people who, believe me, let me know how they felt about the statement. And they said, look, Rob, I'm not racist, but I don't want you to tell me who can come to my home. That's my decision. Right. And I will do what I like because it's my door, and I'm going to decide who's going to stay in my bedroom. And I said, well, that's fine. You're just not going to be able to do it on Airbnb because that's something we need, because that's what we stand for. Yeah. So what are you expecting of the book? Like who should read this? I mean, what a topic at what a time, Like
I think
your wife's good at what she does, apparently.
Yeah. I think that integrity is something that is it's critical in our politics. It's critical in the way that we do business, and it's critical in our personal, human life and the way we treat others. So, look, I'd love to think that anybody could read the book. It's a very practical book. There's not a lot of Socrates or Plato or anything. It's really a very practical book on how to drive integrity into the culture of your organization and into your life. So I'd like to think that it's something that everybody could benefit from, and that if all of us, again, we might disagree about what integrity means in any particular circumstance. Yeah. But where I think we need to get is that we all need to strive to act with integrity. It does really matter. And I think if we can even all agree to that and we all try, I think that our organizations will operate better and the world will be a better place.
It's pretty exciting. So what's next for you? Is it the post-COVID book tour, or what's the?
Usually you get to go out, you get on an airplane,
right?
You go to studios, you sit in a room with someone like Kent here,
exactly,
and do this and that, and speak at conferences. We've had to pivot.
Yeah.
So I'm spending time doing remote, virtual conferences, trying to reach hundreds or several thousand people at a time with the message, going to companies and talking, with companies about, helping them. There are a number of companies that this really resonates with them. They just haven't thought about how to do it. So if I can help them do it, that's great. And if I have to do it remotely, I'll do it remotely.
Well, now you're the guy who wrote the book.
I'm the guy that wrote the book, so I must know something, right?
Thanks so much for doing this. So when as this COVID thing lifts, I'll be optimistic about that. Where are you going to? Where do you plan to travel first?
Well, that's a great question. I worked at Airbnb, so I love travel. You can't work at that company without enjoying travel. Right now, I'm looking just to get anywhere outside of my
Right.
house,
Yeah.
right? And I'll tell you, I think that right now it's more about a change of scenery as opposed to what the
Yeah.
scenery is. So I
Yeah.
think I'm just looking forward to getting out no matter what. So I
That-
think early on, it may be somewhere within driving distance,
yeah.
but I want to go back out and see the world even
Well,
more.
it's funny, we just did that. We rented an Airbnb in Jackson, California. Now, I've never heard of Jackson, California, but it's in the middle of gold country and it's 90 degrees and they have a pool.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
great.
I discovered it on Airbnb and, it'd be a couple days in the desert.
Get away out there, just see something
Yeah.
different, see what a local community is like. I think that's where I'm going to start.
Yeah.
And then hopefully as the world allows, get on airplanes and
This is great.
continue to explore the world.
So how should people find you, find the book? Should they follow you on Twitter or what do you...
I'm on LinkedIn almost every day.
there you go.
I do post about integrity, all the time. So one way to get me is on LinkedIn, Rob Chesnut. And I'm happy to connect with anybody that's interested in this subject. There's a website, of course, www.intentionalintegrity.com. The book is available starting July 28th at all the major outlets, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I think most importantly, your local bookstore.
Yeah, for sure. So the book is Intentional Integrity, How Smart Companies Can Lead an Ethical Revolution. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me,
This is great. Something Ventured podcast. Rob Chesnut has been my guest. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks.